this video we're going to start to look at our create, read, update and delete functionality, also known as CRUD. Now we're going to split this video into two, so we're going to start off with create functionality first of all. The first thing we're going to do is start by opening up Visual Studio 2019 and we're going to open up our store app. So once we have that open, the first thing we're going to do is create a new controller. So I'm going to do this by copying and pasting my home controller into the controllers directory, then I'm going to go into there and make a couple of changes to that file. So I'm going to just rename this file. In this case the file is going to be called our product controller, and we're going to use this to deal with any products that we're going to add into our store application. Once I've got that created, I'm just going to tweak the class name. Remember, the class name needs to match the name of the controller itself, the name of the file. So in this case, product controller with an uppercase P. I'm going to leave this file as it is for now, but we are going to come back to it shortly and tweak it again further. So you can see there are some standard things in here. So for example, we're using our store models, which is what we want to happen. What I'm also going to do now is create a duplicate of this user's model, and we're going to call it products. Now the reason we're creating this is we're going to be dealing with another table in the database called products. Remember, we need to have a new model for each table in our database. Now we're going to use our SQL Server Object Explorer to make changes to the database, so in this case to add a new table. So that will be on the left hand side. If it's not, you can actually click on View on your top menu bar and you can then scroll down to SQL Server Object Explorer and select that and then just pin it to the left hand side. Once I've got that there, I'm going to expand my projects. I'm going to expand my local database, expand the databases folder, and in there we can see my store database. I'm going to expand that further and go into tables, and this is where we'll see our users table created in our last tutorial. We're now going to go ahead and create a new table in here. So I'm going to right click on add new table. So the first change we're going to make to this table is we're going to change the name. So at the minute you can see we create a new table, so DBO just stands for database object, and then in the square brackets we have table, which is the table name. So we're going to change this, we're going to change it to products. The next thing we're going to do is change our unique identifier from ID. We're going to change it to product_ID. That just is a bit clearer than leaving it at ID when we're dealing with multiple tables at once. Once we've made that change, I'm going to go ahead and add some additional fields into this table. So the next field is going to be name, so we're going to have a product name in here. We're going to have a product price, and we're also going to have a recommended retail price, or an RRP. We're also just going to tweak the data types. So I'm happy with name, we're going to leave that as nchar for now. And we're going to set that as 30 characters. That means I can have a product name which is up to 30 characters long. Our price, we're going to change to decimal. And we're going to set it as a decimal, 10, and then 2. I'm also going to do the same with RRP because it's also going to be part of the product pricing. So the next thing I need to do with this table is just to set my unique identifier to auto increment. So when I add additional products into the table, it's going to add those without causing any clashes or any issues. So if I click on the product ID and then I go into the right hand properties window at the bottom here, and I'm looking for a property in there called identity specification, I'm going to change that to true. I'm going to leave the identity increment and identity seed exactly the same, so that's just whether it increments by 1, so i.e. product ID 1, then 2, then 3. And now that I'm happy, I'm going to commit the changes and create that table in the database, and we can see down here that it's now going to tick to say it's been completed successfully. I'm done with that table now, so I'm going to close that off. We can see just in the left hand side in our SQL Server Object Explorer that table is now present in our database, and we're going to come back to our model, which is where we're going to continue making changes. So the first change here is going to be to change the class name to products to match the table name. We're then going to tweak all of our fields so that they match what's in the table itself. So we're going to change user ID to be product ID. We're going to change username to be name, so for the product name. We're going to change password to be price, and these data types are fine just now. We're going to change our password to be price, and we're going to change the data type here to decimal because we know it's going to store a decimal. We're going to grab this line and paste it below, leave the data type the same, and then we're going to change the field name to RRP. So that's now our model created, or the basis of our model for our products. Next thing we're going to do is return back to our controller, and we're going to tidy this up a bit, and then we're going to add some additional actions or methods in here. So we're going to leave ourselves with a bare controller with just an index action at the moment. There we go, so that's it nice and tidy. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is creating a new record in our database, or a new product in this case. So again, in our product controller, we're going to start off by creating a new function or a new method in here. However, before we do that, we do need to create a new folder in our views directory, which is going to handle all of the views for our products controller. So remember, in views we need to have a matching folder name which matches the controller name, so in this case it's going to be product. Once I've got that created, I'm going to grab the standard index template from the home directory, and I'm going to paste that into my product directory, so that's just going to give me a bare bones template for the time being. I'm going to just tweak the text in here just to say create a new product. And then inside this file I'm going to get rid of this paragraph tag, and we're going to create the basis for a standard submission form. So it's going to have the fields in that I need to save into this products table. So remember, this is just Bootstrap, and we're using Bootstrap as our front end framework, so our HTML and CSS. So everything that I do type here, you can just do the standard HTML, but I'm going to be applying classes which allow me to keep in line with Bootstrap. And we can see that the IDE helps me to do that because it understands that we've got Bootstrap linked into the project. So I'm going to start off with a form group. I'm going to add a new input. Input type's just going to be text. I'm going to give my field a name, and the name for the field is going to be name, which matches the field in the database. Now it's important that we have a capital letter here, so where I've got name, it's got a capital N. I'm then going to add in some blank value tags for now, and I'm going to add a standard Bootstrap class onto the form input, which is just form control, which keeps it responsive. Now I've got a standard field, I'm going to copy and paste this for each of the fields that I need, and I'm just going to tweak the name tag. So in this case I'm going to change it to price, and in this one to RRP. So those are now my standard fields in my form. There's one thing I'm missing here, and that's just to add in a button. So I'm going to add a button and just say save new product. I'm going to give this button a class, just btn, and then btn primary, which again is just standard Bootstrap, so we get the standard styling for that button in there. And this is now my form created. Next thing I'm going to do on here is just surround that form. I'm going to surround it with some razor syntax, which starts off with an @ symbol. I'm going to say using HTML begin form. I'm going to pass in the controller method that we're going to be using to create the product, which we haven't created just yet. In this case we're going to call that method create. We're going to pass in the controller name, which we already know is products, or product, and then the final parameter is just going to be what we want to happen when we click that submit button. So in this case we're going to submit the form using a post method. So we're going to say form method dot post. I'm then going to open my curly braces and move the closing curly brace below my form elements, and then just indent everything so it's tidied up. There is one last thing I can add to this form, and that is our anti-forgery token. And what that does is it prevents any other website from posting to our form, so it protects our users and our data. So again, that's razor syntax. We start with the @ symbol. And that's everything done on my form that I need to have there for me to be able to create a new product in the database. So now I'm going to pop back to my product controller, and inside here we're going to create the method or the action which is going to allow us to not only show the form but also to submit the form and save the data. So we're going to start off with the show form action. So we're going to create a new public action which expects a result. We're going to call it create, and then within this function we're just going to return a view which is just going to show us our create form. Now we're going to just go back just quickly and just rename our index.cs HTML file that we added into the product folder earlier and just change it to create. The reason why we change it to create is because then it matches this function name. So when I call create from the website itself or the web app, it's going to load this view automatically for me. So now I've done that, I can go back into my controller and I'm going to tag this function to say that we only want to show it on a GET request. So we don't want to show this if we're posting information. So that means we're only going to get it when we request it in the web browser URL. So now we've got that, if I was to launch my app, I could go to this web address, so /product/create, and it would show me my create form. But there's something else I need to add here, and that's the ability to save that information once I click the post button. And we can now see the create form is actually displayed there, but I am missing my labels on here. So I'm going to go back into my HTML for this view and just tweak it slightly to add in the labels so it's a bit clearer on what these fields are. So if I stop my app, I'm going to go back to my create form and I'm going to add these labels into each form group. So just label 4, the 4 needs to match the field name, so the tag below you can see input name equals name, capital N at the start. And then whatever I put in the label is just what's going to be displayed on the form, so it's kind of irrelevant, it's just for display purposes. I'm going to paste this into each form group and just tweak the text in there, and also the 4 tag for the label. So now I'm going to go back to my controller and we're going to create the method which is going to allow me to post this information or save it into the database. So we're going to start with public. It's going to be an asynchronous method indicated by async in our code. It's going to complete a task for us and we're going to expect a result from that task. We're going to call it the exact same name, so you can see on line 31 we've created a function called create. Now normally on line 36 where I've also created another function called create, this would clash and give us an issue. Now because we've tagged that function on line 31 with HTTP GET, it knows only to run that when we're calling a GET request. In this case we're going to use this function only for a POST request. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to bind our fields. These are fields from our form. So we're going to bind our product ID, our name, our price and our RRP. Then after that we're going to bind these to a new object which is of type products called product. I'm going to open and close my curly braces for this function. And the next thing we're going to do is just tag this function with HTTP post to say that we only want to run this on a post request. Now we can see I've got a squiggly line underneath this create function just now, and that's because this function is an asynchronous function and we're waiting for something to happen. So we haven't created an awaitable element to this function just yet, or this method. So we're going to go ahead and add that shortly. So before I move into writing the body of the function, we're going to check to make sure that when we post we're getting our anti-forgery token we set up in the form earlier. So I can do that by annotating this function again with validate anti-forgery token in square brackets above. Next thing we're going to do is now write the functionality to allow me to create this new product in the database itself. So what I'm going to do is start off with an if statement, and I'm going to check that the model state is valid. So this model is going to be our products model. So what we mean by valid is that anything that I try to enter is going to match the data types in that database, or in that table in the database. So I'm going to start by writing a try catch statement. So try is going to try something, so it's going to try and do something with the data, so in this case add it. We're going to try and add a new product. And we can see here we have an error or squiggly red line underneath our underscore context. So there is something we've actually missed at the top of this file. We're going to go ahead and add that shortly. So now we're going to add in our await section of this code. So we're going to say await underscore context. .save changes async because it's an asynchronous action. And that's it. So what we're saying on these 2 lines is to try and add a new product to the product table via the products model, and then try and save the changes to the database. And if there is an issue here, if there is an issue after this try statement, we're going to try and catch the error, and we're going to spit that error out onto the screen so we know what's going on. So we're just going to populate this catch element with throw in there, which is going to throw an exception. So now we can see we still have our red squiggly lines underneath underscore context, and that's because we haven't actually included it in this controller yet. So that's what we're going to do now. So we're going to add a private read-only. We're going to use default context, and we're going to name it underscore context, which is nice and easy for us to recall throughout this controller when we need it. The next thing we're going to do is create a constructor method, and inside that constructor method we're going to load this context in there and populate it so we can use it again throughout this controller. So in a constructor, the name needs to have the exact same name as a controller. So you can see here public product controller, so product controller being the name of the class or the name of the controller itself. We're going to pass in our default context. We're going to pass in our default context as context without the underscore for now. So this is just us loading it into somewhere where we can use it. Okay, so on line 20 I've actually messed up here and I put underscore context. It needs to be context. So we'll just tweak that. There we go. So underscore context is just going to equal context. So that's it now in a read-only element in there, so we can't touch it, we can't change it, we can only make use of it. Okay, so that's us now set up ready to use those underscore context. You can see those errors have gone under there. The next thing we need to do is, if we have actually added a product, where we're going to go to, what's going to happen. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up a message to display on the screen. So we're going to use what's called flash data here, which is indicated by temp data in ASP.NET Core. We're going to call it message, and inside there we're going to say product added successfully. And then we're going to redirect to another location. So this would usually probably be a products list. In this case we haven't got that products list created just yet, so we're going to redirect back to the create form, which is fine for now. So we're going to use redirect to action. We're going to pop in there name of, which means the name of the current controller, and then we're going to redirect back to the create method, which is where we are currently. And we can see that our create still has a red squiggly underscore just now. Now the reason why is because there is actually a dead end in this method, so we need to add a kind of all-out solution to something if none of this runs. So if the model state isn't valid, what's going to happen? So in this case, if the model state isn't valid, we're going to return a view, and we're going to pass back that product information to the view. So that means that if we do try and save, we're not going to lose that submission data from the form. Okay, so that's us now prepared to insert some data into this database. So I can run this. I'm going to go to my controller, which is product, and then the create method. And you can see I have my product form. It isn't styled too great just now. Again, it's just standard Bootstrap, but we have a central line on there, which is why everything's central. I'm going to add in a product name, so just test in this case, product price of $10.99 and an RRP of $18.99. I'm going to click Save New Product. Now we can see we get an exception from here, so this is exactly what throw does in this case. And what's happening is it's saying that entity type products was not found. Now that's because we missed adding something into our default context, so we're going to go there and add that next. So we'll close our app. We're going to open the default context file, and then on line 20 you can see we've got our DB set, and we've got store models and users. Now store models is greyed out here, so that means it's not being used, so we're just going to remove that and tidy up this file a tiny bit. So we're now saying DB set users, we can get and set information into the users table in our database. Now at the moment we haven't got our products table, so we're going to add that just by copying and pasting that line and then tweaking users to products, and that means we can now deal with that products table. I'm going to rerun the app. I'm going to go back to my product create function. So product being the model, create the method again, or function name, I'm going to add in test at $10.99, and then its RRP is going to be $18.99 again. I'm going to click Save New Product. Okay, we can see the form does refresh. Remember, after the redirect, we're not sending it anywhere special just yet. We're just telling it to come back to the create form. So that now means that something has happened in our store. So that has been added to our database. So to show you that, we're going to go into our SQL Server Object Explorer, and we're going to view the data inside the products table. And we can see we now have our product, which is called test. We have a product price of £11 here, and an RRP of $18.99. So notice now that I'm clicking on test, you can see there's loads of blue padding in there. Now what this is because of the field type. So because I've got it as nchar at the minute, what that means is that because I've only got 4 letters in there, so in this case just the word test, what's happening is the rest of the space in that field, so the other 26 characters are just being padded out. So there's blank space in there effectively. So I'm still getting 30 characters in length, 26 with a load of rubbish or blank space, and the 4 characters just being the word test at the moment. So we're going to go back into our database here and just tweak this data type slightly to prevent that from happening. So to do that, you're going to go into your SQL Server Object Explorer. We're going to right click on the table name again, and this time we're going to click to edit that table. We can see our field name, which is just name, and we're going to change that from nchar to nvarchar and click update. You can now see that action's been completed as well. So now if we go back and view the data for that table, we'll see that our test field remains the same. So we can see again there's a big gap there. We're going to just delete that. And then if we move fields, it's going to commit for us anyway. Okay, so now if I go back into test, you can see all that padding's gone. So I click in there, it only highlights the word test. Now just to show you that's the case, we're going to go back into our app, and we're going to add a new product, and I'm going to show you that in action, and show you that that padding's now no longer in place. So back to product and create. I'm going to add in a new product, so we're going to add Woody from Toy Story. It's going to be £10, and his RRP is going to be £30 and 20 pence. And I'm going to save that new product. Okay, so again that form clears, so that means it should be in my database now. So I'm going to close my app. I'm going to refresh this table. And see I now have Woody, his price is £10 and his RRP is £30 and 20 pence. But the important thing here is that Woody hasn't got that extra pad on the end like what tested previously. So there is one more thing we're going to add in here before we leave the video, and that is, if you remember in our controller we'd added in our flash message or flash data which said that the product was added successfully, and you'll notice that doesn't display, or it hasn't displayed so far. So we're going to go into our view again and we're going to add in some additional razor syntax which is going to display that message when it's there. So remember, anything razor starts with an @ symbol. We're going to write an if statement, we're going to grab that temp data, and we're going to look for message which is inside temp data. So we're going to check that the message isn't null, and then inside here we're simply going to output temp data message in some nice standard Bootstrap notification or alert styles. So we're going to start with a div with the class alert, and then alert success because it's going to be, the product's going to be created, so we want it to be green. And inside there, again, razor syntax, we're going to output our message. So at temp data, and then square brackets, speech marks, message. I'm just going to indent that and keep our code nice and tidy. Now if we run our app again, we're going to add an additional product, and we should now see this message display on the screen. So in this case, we're going to go back to product/create, and you'll see there's no flash message on there, there's nothing displaying even though it's in that template. The reason being we've not created a product yet. So we're going to add another product to show this working now as well. So this new product we're going to add is Buzz. He's going to be $12.99 and his RRP is going to be £15. I'm going to click Save New Product. So that's going to redirect us back to our Create New Product screen, but we now have our flash message. However, we have a semicolon which I've typed in the template file which we didn't need earlier, but but either way, it's now displaying. We've got a nice green style in our Bootstrap notification styles. And what you can do is you can go in and you can add a dismissible event. So what happens is when this pops up, we'll have a little cross at the top right corner. You can click that and close this notification off the screen. Okay, so that's it for creating products. So I'm going to split these videos. Again, I wasn't going to do this, but in the next video, what we'll look at is the rest of the process. So the create does actually build on quite a lot of what we need for the rest of the CRUD functionality. So the read, update and delete is what we're going to do next. Okay, so thanks for watching. Remember to check out the next video.